Overnight, a Texas congressman was carjacked at gunpoint just blocks from the Capitol. Our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, has more details. Good morning, Pierre.
Michael, good morning. This brazen armed robbery involving a member of Congress is the latest sign of a disturbing spike in gun crime in this city. At 9:30 last night, Congressman Henry Cuellar was attempting to park his car in the neighborhood not far from the U.S. Capitol. Three men approached him and took his car at gunpoint. The good news, he was unharmed and police found his vehicle. The bad news, his carjacking is one of more than 700 so far this year in the nation's capital. Robin, that's more than double the amount at the same point last year.
Already more than double, Pierre. Thank you.
Well, the Democrats' soft on crime, defund the police scheme is coming back to bite them. Henry Cuellar, a Democratic representative from Texas, was carjacked on Monday. You probably didn't hear much about it. You heard a little bit about it, but all the uproar in D.C. has been about the Republicans removing Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. But what happened to Henry Cuellar has been happening in D.C. all summer long.
Nationwide, crime is dominating the headlines here in America. The Council on Criminal Justice says violent crimes have become more common over the past 4 years. In the first half of this year, the U.S. had 24% more murders than the same time frame in 2019. And car thefts are skyrocketing, up 104% over the last 4 years. Washington, D.C. leaders say the district is in a state of emergency due to the high crime rate. Compared to 2022, Washington has seen a 37% increase in violent crime this year alone. As CBN's Caitlin Burke reports, many of the victims are children.
The D.C. Council recently passed emergency legislation aimed at addressing the surge in crime by making it easier to detain criminals ahead of trial. The bill also imposes more serious penalties for certain crimes and expedites court cases involving child victims.
When we have members of our community being shot and killed at rates that we haven't seen for 20 years, that's an emergency, period.
Since this time last year, homicide rates are up 20%. There's been a 60% spike in robberies and a 30% increase in sex abuse. The surging crime numbers resulting in warnings from foreign governments to their citizens planning to travel to D.C. Brooke Pinto, the D.C. council member who introduced the new emergency legislation, says it will address gaps in the legal system and hold offenders accountable.
Things like ensuring that people can be held pre-trial for committing crimes of violence in the adult system, making sure it's a standalone offense to discharge a firearm in the public, ensuring that our police officers are empowered to engage in a vehicular pursuit if there are public safety dictates that they must.
The crime bill will be in effect for 90 days, but D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has signaled she plans to propose similar legislation later this year that could make the changes permanent. Congress has full oversight over D.C., and they used that authority to overturn an attempt to rewrite the district's criminal code earlier this year, saying it was too soft on crime. They've had several oversight hearings looking into what's behind the soaring crime numbers, but did not weigh in on the emergency crime bill because of its temporary status. Any permanent legislation on crime will need their approval.
What you have here is a spirit of lawlessness. The Bible talks about this in the last days. There's going to be lawlessness. Jesus talked about this in Matthew 24. There's going to be a lot of lawlessness going on before the return of Christ. And that's what we're experiencing in all the major cities. And you know what has contributed to that even more? These soft on crime, Soros DAs who do not prosecute criminals, who value the lives of criminals more than the lives of the victims that were the recipients of the crime committed by the perpetrators.
As D.C. struggles with rising crime and a shrinking police force, as many departments around the country are, the News 4 I-Team had some questions about where officers are deployed.
Using the department's own numbers, the I-Team and investigative reporter Ted Oberg found a shrinking number of police in D.C.'s most violent neighborhoods. Ted joins us now to explain what he found. Ted?
Yeah, Erica and Leon, this is important. The new chief just said this week she wants to deploy more officers to places where there is more crime. So take a look at the situation today. More crime means more calls that officers need to respond to. But when we looked at DC's own reporting, some parts of the city with the most violent gun crime have fewer officers than they did a year ago, while some with less gun violence got increased police presence. It's true in multiple neighborhoods, but we went to the spot with the most gun violence. On a hot summer day in Southeast DC, the News 4 I team stopped by this resource fair, an event put on by Councilmember Trayon White to help connect people with services and police and cut down on violence. And even here, it didn't take long to find someone touched so closely, so completely by gunfire.
It's my heart. This is my best friend.
Trezzy Conyers lost her daughter to a bullet. Official records will tell you it was 9 years ago. It doesn't seem like that to her.
That pain, I wish that pain on nobody. It hurts.
Standing next to her, another mom.
It's unsafe. It's affordable, but it's unsafe.
With younger children, but a fear that's driving her to find a way out of this neighborhood. And you ever call the police when you hear it?
No.
Why not?
I mean, it's become, unfortunately, like a normal thing.
DC police report this neighborhood in the city's farthest southeast corner is home to the most gun crime in the city. 41 shootings or homicides with a gun since January of this year in this police service area. 16 more than this time last year. That's a 64% increase.
People who have an irregard and a spirit of lawlessness where they shooting in front of the police.
You really believe there's a spirit of lawlessness here?
Oh, you can see it every day.
But despite that rising number of shootings, somehow there are fewer police officers here. According to the most recent staffing report from DC Police released just days ago, 25 officers are assigned to patrol this corner of the city. PSA 708, 25 officers total. A year ago, there were 4 more officers, and in that year, 16 fewer shootings and gun homicides here. As DC police deal with a shrinking force, nearly half of PSAs have fewer officers than last year. Would you like to see more here?
Yeah, more help would be nice. These are people too.
And it's all intentional, especially when it comes to their quote-unquote marginalized communities, because that's where the crime happens. As you heard, most of the crime happens in black and brown neighborhoods, in particular black neighborhoods, where there's a lack of police, a lack of attention, and people are not going to call the police because they know the police will not come and get them, and vice versa. The police don't want to come to those areas because the minds of those citizens have been poisoned to the fact that they think the police is the enemy. They think the police is going around hunting them, which they're not. Crime statistics show that the police are not going around hunting black men, but black men are hunting each other. And what is happening when it starts to seep out of these communities and move to the suburbs? That's when you start to see change. And that shows you the lack of attention and the lack of genuineness of some of these people that talk about defunding police, that talk about being soft on crime, that elevate the criminal over the victim. It's all good because they don't have to feel the ramifications of it. The people that feel the ramifications of it are the folks that they say they are fighting for, which are lying. They're just lying. They're doing this as a part of the whole plot to disrupt the fabric of America, to unmoor America from its biblical values, to unmoor America from the republic that it is, to bring in fear, to bring in chaos, so they can come in and institute an authoritarian state. That's all, and they want to take away the rights of Americans, your Second Amendment rights, take your guns away. And it's so funny that in these cities and states where there are the strictest gun laws is where you have the most crime. Now, some people would point to, oh man, you got a lot of crime in red states. But have you looked at the cities where the crime is happening? And who's running all those cities? It's funny. Karine Jean-Pierre tried to deflect from this recently.
Does the White have any comment on the carjacking of Representative Cuellar? Did the president reach out to him? And more broadly, does it say anything about safety and crime in the district?
So what we saw happen, the reporting that we saw happen to the congressman obviously was unacceptable. The president did have an opportunity to speak with the congressman today. This is the president, unlike Republicans, has actually put forth billions of dollars, or has taken action to make sure that there are billions of dollars in his budget every year. And through the American Rescue Plan, let's not forget, there were billions of dollars in his American Rescue Plan so that local communities and state and federal police as well, law enforcement, were able to make sure that they had the funding so that they can hire more law enforcement. I know you're going to follow up on that. What's your question?
Well, the first follow-up would be, how are you going to blame Republicans for this? Isn't D.C. run by a bunch of Democrats?
I'm going to speak to what the president has done, right? The president has been very, very straightforward about what he has done to make sure that communities are safe. American Rescue Plan, not one Republican in Congress voted for it. Not one. There were billions of dollars in that plan, in that act, to make sure communities across the country got funding so that they can indeed hire more police officers.
So if President Biden's policies are helping bring crime down, would he be comfortable with somebody borrowing his Corvette and parking it on the street overnight in Southeast D.C.?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. I'm just going to get into the facts about what this president has done.
If a member of Congress is not safe on the streets of the nation's capital, who is?
Look, we're grateful and relieved that the congressman is unharmed. We understand what communities are going through across the country, not just in D.C. That's why the president took action very early on in his administration to get the American Rescue Plan done.
But it's all intentional. They're doing this intentionally. They want to do this because that's the only way you can have people clamoring for more government intrusion. You have to make things so bad that the people are crying out for the government to come and save them. That's the whole plan. That's the whole point. They don't believe in individualism. They don't believe that the citizenry have enough of an agency within them to help themselves out. See, a lot of people don't understand. You know, the federal government wasn't always this big. It's only been recently, in the past 100 or so years, with Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democratic progressive icon, who was racist, who started to implement the administrative state. You know, the federal government wasn't that big. So what you see is the end result and the fruit of these soft on crime policies, the fruit of this progressive ideology, Marxist ideology that the elites, those people know more. The intelligence agency, the bureaucracy, the administrative state hates you. It hates you as a citizen. So it does whatever it can to strip you of your rights and give themselves more power. They want you to be perpetual victims. They do. They want you to be a perpetual victim so you can constantly cry out to them for security, for safety, for comfort. Well, I'm here to tell them we're not victims. We are empowered for greatness.